Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Imperfect Marketing. I am your host, Kendra Corman, and today I have with me Alesia Galati, right?
Galati, yes.
See, I did it right the first time, and then I mess up on it. But anyway, Alesia is here. She's been listening to podcasts since 2015, and she knows what goes into creating a standout podcast that captures your audience's attention even before they press play. Very cool. Alesia's helped coaches and thought leaders launch and maintain over 50 podcasts and has developed a signature, thorough system to launching and managing podcasts so you don't have to stress about anything falling through the cracks. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super happy to have you.
Yes, I am so excited to be here as well. Marketing is so important, especially for business owners, because they didn't go to school for it like I did, and I'm guessing you did as well. So I think it's so important that there are people like us, right, that can help these content creators, podcasters, business owners get their message out there in a way that's effective without being like, oh, just following what the latest trends are. So important.
It's all about what works, right?
Yes.
That's got to be key. And podcasts work. So somebody listening might be thinking of starting a podcast. What would you tell them that would get them over that hump and get them into doing it?
So I think I would start with a story. When I was younger, I used to sing in choir. I would lead music and, would as like a lead singer doing all these great things and absolutely loved my voice. And when I was in college, I got really sick. And I don't know what exactly it was, some type of respiratory thing. And it took me from a soprano all the way down to singing with the guys. And so that really took a hit to my desire to speak or to present or do anything. I mean, I've done tons of speaking, in front of thousands of people. And I was like, oh my goodness, how am I supposed to even be me anymore if I can't do the things that I've been able to do? Even to the point that I had a coworker, and I worked in manufacturing and supply chain, so mostly dudes. I had a coworker tell me, Alesia, your voice is so annoying. And I was like, oh man, I don't care about what you have to say, but also just that internal monologue that had already been going really hit me a bit. So in 2015, like you said, started listening to podcasts. 2016 was on my very first podcast guesting appearance, and then launched mine in 2018. And what I discovered as I was launching was I have to get my voice out there. It is so important that you are sharing your message. And yes, there's somebody who's probably 1,000 times more quote unquote popular than you or celebrity status than you who has a podcast out there, but no one has your lived experiences. So no one can say that story exactly how I can because no one has lived that exact thing. And so podcasting allows you to connect with your audience in such an incredible way, but also without the biases that tend to happen with video or social media. You're not fighting people for that spot, that dopamine hit, right? Like you would on like TikTok or other places. They are literally saying, I'm pressing play to spend 30 minutes with you. That is so powerful. And so if you're like, oh, should I start a podcast? If that doesn't inspire you to just do it, then I don't know what else will.
Okay. So let me hit a couple of things that I think are really important for people to hear. So first off, you didn't like your own voice.
I still don't.
Other people told you that they didn't like your voice. And you still move forward with it. You still don't like your voice. Guess what? It doesn't matter. You have valuable information to share and you just need to move forward with it. Because I don't think that your voice sounds like nails on a chalkboard. It's not annoying to me.
Thank you.
Just so you know. I just want to get it out there. You have a very nice voice. I've been told numerous times that I have a 1-900 sex line voice. So,
which is great for podcasting too.
I got it from my mother. This is a business podcast. This is not fantasy. Okay. So, but let's go ahead and keep talking. The thing is that you did it, you moved forward, and you built a business off of it, even not liking your own voice. I mean, I think that that's one of the biggest things that hold people back is that they don't like the sound of their own voice. I don't like the sound of my own voice. I got over it. After I edited episode 150 something, I was like, well, that's what I sound like. The end. Because I think it's, again, I think it's very important to be out there. And my podcast is probably, well, not probably, it is my largest lead generator for my business. It fuels most of my social media. It fuels most of my email newsletters. It really does fuel my business. So let's talk about that because I love talking about things that work and things that generate business. Because as we talked about, the dopamine hits from the people liking your stuff on social media, they don't pay the mortgage. Just talked about that last week when I was talking about video. And I think that it's really important to note that it's about what rings that cash register, what pays the mortgage, right? That's the differentiator. So what's going to get you there? So if somebody is looking to leverage their podcast for lead generation, what suggestions do you have for them?
Yeah. So one of the first things I usually ask people if they're like, oh, I want to generate leads with my podcast. And I'll say, do you talk about what you do? And they're like, no, I don't. It's like, that is your first step. Like, there are ways to sell on your podcast without being salesy. There are ways to talk about your services in a way that feels good. It feels ethical, like, especially as women, right? We tend to shy away from putting ourselves out there and talking about money
Selling
and
is
how
a
to make
4-letter word,
money.
right?
Yes. And so it's so important that you're talking about your services, but not even that you are giving examples and sharing ways that people have worked with you and how it worked or what it did. You're able to put your audience and feel like, oh, yeah, I'm struggling with that. And if she was able to help that person, then I would love to be able to help, to get that help. Or if her free content is this incredible, then of course I'm going to pay money for that more custom and personalized experience. And like you said, like podcasting can fuel all of our content. So when it comes to what you're creating for social media, and that way you can get on more sales calls instead of being like, well, I have to come up with something for a blog post this week, or I have to post on LinkedIn this week, and I don't even know what I'm going to talk about. Just do your podcast, put it on all of those places, repurposing that content. It's so important that we work smart, not harder, and that we're actually putting the sales stuff out there. So, one, are you actually talking about your services? Two, giving those examples. Three, solo episodes. This is so important, and I cannot stress it enough. If you do not have solo episodes, you are literally just a feature for other people. And while that's great and it can create connections, and if your goal is to get guests on that could become clients, then that's a good strategy. But if your goal is to turn your listeners into leads, you have to have solo episodes so that you can show up as the expert and allow people to understand more about what you do and how you work with people. So those three things I think are really great starting points to at least start getting you moving in the right direction. And I would say four, definitely have a call to action. And that could be signing up for your newsletter. It could be working with you, signing up for a workshop. What is that next logical step for that listener based on the content of that episode?
Oh, I love that so much. And I love it because yes, I started off, I was doing all these interview episodes and I was like, but nobody gets to hear what I think. And then so instead of mixing those in to my existing schedule, I added a whole new like second release date every week. Which I don't necessarily recommend when you're starting out, just as a tip, because I actually don't usually recommend it even if you're on episode 200 and something like I am. Um, it's a lot,
Agreed.
right? It can be a lot. But you're right, because I was interviewing all these people and sharing some of my stuff a little bit like I'm doing right now. But I wasn't the expert. I brought you here to talk about your story and your expertise, and people weren't hearing that other side of mine. While guests and guesting, I think, are one of the best ways to grow your podcast and your podcast listeners, it's not necessarily the most effective in building your business 100%.
Yeah,
So
agreed.
let's talk about, and then I'll tell you, let me just digress for just a second. I did actually talk to someone. Their entire business model, their entire networking profile was based off their guests. They would talk to their guests before and after the episode, and they would work to sell their services. And I was like, huh, and it didn't feel slimy and like
Right.
sales, like it felt like a true connection, which I really liked. So I thought that was interesting. But anyway, I digress. Okay. Let's talk about growing, because again, guests and guesting I have found have really moved the needle for me, but I am sure you have a lot of other ideas and ways that people can grow their podcast.
Yeah. So guesting is 100% the quickest way to get people to go back and listen to your show. And if you are a guest on someone else's podcast, at the end of the conversation, redirect them to where they can listen, because podcast listeners love to listen to podcasts. And so if they enjoy the conversation that you're having, then they're thinking, oh, cool, I can learn more about this topic over at this podcast. So redirect people over back to your show. Don't send them to other places, especially if your goal is to grow your listenership, right? We want one call to action, one direction to take people. So that is really, really important. And then I would say for like the social media marketing, it's hard right now for a lot of podcasters. So many people are really struggling with seeing any type of traction with their shows or any type of engagement. And so with that, I would say you really have to lean in to what's working. And so all of our clients, even if they have an audio only podcast, we still do video marketing, because that is what converts. That's what stops people in the scroll. So even if you just have an audio podcast, have some type of talking head, as I like to say, video of you. Even if you do something like after you record the episode, you record a video on your phone and you talk about the different topics in it. Make sure you go listen to that episode. There you go. That's your social reel or your short or your TikTok for that episode. So there are tons of ways to do this. That would be the social media side, really leaning into that video. SEO. I know people are saying SEO is dead. It's not. It's just shifting and changing a little bit. So when you said, even before they hit play, that title, that description, those are great for search terms, not just in Google, but also in the podcast players. I have a friend where she was talking to a brand new client, and they had found her because they searched productivity in their podcast app, found one of her episodes, was like, I like her, I need what she has, and then went and booked a strategy session with her. So from that, making sure that her episodes were titled correctly. It wasn't, oh, what I learned on my vacation to, Puerto Rico or whatever. Like, it was, no, this is what you're going to get. Number one productivity tip for business owners. So be very careful. And like you said, using AI and tools, like there are tons of tools available to us now. You don't have to be an SEO expert. You can ask Gemini or ChatGPT. Here's the transcript. Give me 10 really high quality SEO title ideas based on this content, and they'll give them to you, and you can pick and choose and kind of shift them however you want to make sure that that content is clear. Your show notes, the description, that first paragraph should be heavy on SEO. I recently had a client, he wanted me to share an episode he was on. The title of the podcast episode was his name, and then the description was his bio, and then where to redirect with the host. And I was like, there's no way that I'm not going to sit here for 45 minutes and listen to this conversation. I ran it through a transcription, threw it in the software, said, give me a general overview of this conversation, and then pulled that to be able to create some social posts and put it on his email. Like, there are so many tools out there to make this easy for us. So making sure that that first paragraph has all of that information, what people are going to learn, you've got those key takeaways, and then a little hidden gem. If you guys are already like you're good on the SEO and all that stuff, the back end of your podcast player should have some type of chapter markers or timestamps. Now, I don't recommend putting these into either your blog post or to your show notes, but if there's a back end way to do it, like Buzzsprout, I know you use Buzzsprout, I use Buzzsprout, like those are great. They have that chapter marker section that allows for extra SEO as well. So those places are really important. I feel like that. And then if you're doing video, that'll be the last one. It's like getting your podcast out there. If you're titling it correctly, you've got that conversation. Google is trying to put as much push on YouTube podcasts right now. So make the most of it. Make sure you've transitioned over to a YouTube podcast, that you have that playlist, that you're optimizing it, you're reworking it, even if you have to ask, the AI gods, how do I make this better? Do something to make sure that you're doing that correctly. That's going to be really important. One more thing, going back to the SEO stuff. I mean, you're at 250 plus episodes. I have over 150 episodes for my own. I'm actually going back to those original episodes and reworking those titles to be even more optimal for SEO. That redirects people back to that past content that I've got. That's another great way. If you're like kind of feeling stagnant or kind of feeling stuck, go back to those past episodes, rework them a little bit, one at a time. Not telling you to do all of them, one at a time, and that'll get you a little nudge.
I thought about it. I did.
It's hard.
I thought about it. I was like, oh, I should do that. And then I didn't even write it down because I'm like, I don't even know when the heck I'm going to get to that. But no, I agree 100%. That's definitely an important thing, is you can revisit the old stuff. You can take the lessons that you've learned and build off of those, right? I think that that's just really important, which is really great. So let's talk about the other question that I get. So the questions that I get are usually, I don't like my voice. Then
Yep.
it's, how do I get more listeners? How do I grow my podcast? And then third, got all these people that want to be YouTube stars and they want to monetize their podcast. So how do you recommend people monetize their podcast?
So first and foremost, I want people to approach podcasting like they would creating a brand new YouTube channel in 2024. Right out the gate, you're not going to get hundreds of thousands of subscribers right away. Approach your podcast the same way. It is a long game. And podcast listeners will go back and binge your past content. So the more content you have for them to binge, the more likely they are to stay. That is why so many people stop at about 25 episodes. I believe it's 90% of people don't make it to 25 episodes because they think, yeah, right, woo.
I feel like I deserve an award for that. I made it past it on my second podcast, not the first one that made it to episode 7, but we won't talk about that one.
Right. One is that's in the graveyard. It's okay. Yeah, I have one of those as well. It is what it is. But once you've kind of honed in your content, honed in your voice, what you want to speak to, what your listeners need, that is the podcast, right? That's gonna head you in the right direction. But when it comes to monetizing, if you are a business owner, you should be using your podcast to monetize your own stuff, which means you have to be creating connections with your audience. It's not just going to be about, hey, Casper Mattress has this great thing, or Buzzsprout has this great thing, right? Those are chump change you're going to get because your listenership isn't going to be big. We've had clients sell out their group programs with less than 250 downloads per episode. It is possible, but you have to be really strategic with the content that's in your podcast and understanding exactly what it is that your audience needs to go from, I'm feeling frustrated about this topic. Wow, you've helped me get this one little quick win. How can I work with you to get that next win? You have to be thinking about that stuff. If you're just coming on and you're saying, well, today I'm going to talk about my dog because that's what I'm thinking about today. Your audience isn't going to stay for very long. Sorry, nobody cares. Sorry. Like they're there to get some transformation.
Right. And it's when people are listening to a podcast like this one, they want value. They want to learn something that they can apply. That's why, as my podcast evolved, originally it was just all things marketing for small businesses, coaches, consultants, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. And as I've gotten better and more strategic, it narrowed down. I'm talking about podcasting, email marketing, and how to be more productive with tools like AI. And those three main pillars help my audience know what to expect. It was funny. I'm adjunct faculty at a local university, and I was giving my students an assignment, and there's a new radio station that wants to start up, and every hour they're going to play like a gospel song, and then they're going to play a children's song, and then they're going to have like a political interview, and then they're going to have like a history lesson, and then they're going to play pop rock, and then they're going to play. And it was going on all of these things that they were going to do every hour. And the question to them was, is that going to work? Shockingly enough, after they had all turned in their integrated marketing communications assignments and their target audience was basically everyone, they were like, no, that doesn't work because nobody's going to listen to all those different things. They're going to keep changing back and forth. And it's like, yes, yes, it's okay to be known for things. It's okay to niche down because then people know what to expect, right?
Yes. And you're able to reach the right people, right? So as business owners, we don't want to work with everyone. I know I don't. I have zero desire to work with everyone. And I will actually tell people when they get on a call with me, hey, you're not ready for a podcast yet. You should go guesting on other podcasts and hone in your voice. You're not ready. This is a long game. I'm sorry, I'm not going to take your money. Go work a little bit more on getting that message clear before you come back to me. Happy to work with you once you're ready. I've also told people, hey, you're really type A. I'm really type A. This isn't going to work. You want your hands in everything. You want to micromanage it. That's cool, but that's not the kind of clients that I like to work with. And I know that that's not going to work. And I've had clients in the past that are like that have made my team cry. And then I say, nope, never again. So you have to be really clear on who it is that you want to serve with your content, with your podcast, with your business, and just keep talking to that person. Right. And I think that another thing that people tend to feel is like, I've said this already. It's like, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times. That's okay. Keep saying it. It will hit the right person at the right time. And they'll be like, oh, yes, that's what I need to do. Okay, let's go do this. Let's book a strategy session. Let's get clearer on this issue that I'm struggling with. That allows them to move through. But it is a long game. I've had people who had said, been listening to me for years. And then they finally say, I've been listening to your podcast for years. I've been following your content for years, and I want to launch a podcast, and I know I want to do it with you. Awesome. Those are the people that it's an easy sell. It's an easy win. And I'm sure you feel this too when people come to work with you and they're like, oh, I'm a podcast listener. One, they kind of geek out, which is really interesting. It's like the celebrity effect that happens with podcasting. But then it's an easy sell. You don't have to even like talk about the pain, like, okay, this is where we can work, or, the struggles that they might be going through of the things stopping them from working with you. They've already worked through all that.
And it's just, again, it's very powerful a very powerful medium because you build a relationship without even actually meeting. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that is there's just so much there. All right. So I have one question I ask everybody, but before I ask that, let me ask you about your microphone, because
Yes.
in your bio, it says, Alesia's ears have been fine-tuned for high-quality audio. She can only tolerate impeccable podcasts. So don't listen to my historical ones. But anyway, what type of microphone do you have?
So I have the Shure MV7, and this is their podcasting microphone. It is on the higher end, $250 for just the microphone, no additions or anything. But what I love is that it comes with its own little tool that you can use to make your voice more broadcasty or more light. So they've got some interesting tools that way. And I've used tons of other ones, the Samsung. I want Q2U. I want to say is the one,
yeah.
that one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I recommend people use that, especially starting out. It's still a great quality one. But when you're recording, make sure that you are in a quiet environment, that you are where you need to be against your mic, right? So usually I put my pinky and my thumb out, and as long as my face is a little far away, then I won't get a lot of those plosives or heavy breaths or any of that stuff. But then we have tons of tools that we run everything through, because as podcasters, especially when we have guests on our show, we can't always control what they come with and what their background sounds like. And so there are tons of tools out there. One we use is Isotope RX10. Now, it is an expensive tool, but that's why people hire us, because we have those tools to be able to work through the audio, like dog nails clicking on the background of audio, or even we have some clients that are in New York City. So that background noise of the city happens, and we're able to get a lot of that stuff out. So yeah, I struggle with podcasts specifically because in my head, I'm already editing them and where I would take things out or where I would edit certain sounds out. So I tend to just listen to the more overly produced or production ones, like National Geographic ones with my kids. We really like those.
Very cool. Thank you. So before I let you go, and before we wrap up everything, this show is called Imperfect Marketing because marketing is anything but a perfect science. What has been your biggest marketing lesson learned?
This is something that I think learning from college, because I have a degree in marketing, was that market research is so important. And I have not found another podcast production company that does market research before launching a podcast. And what that allows you to do is say, does this make sense to have a podcast on this topic? Or should it be an ongoing one? Should it be a limited series? For example, one of our clients came to us and she wanted to have a podcast on GMOs. There were a lot of episodes about GMOs, but not a lot of podcasts that had been continuously talking about the topic, meaning it probably doesn't make sense to have an ongoing show for this type of topic. So a limited series, we did 15 episodes, makes the most sense. And then we bookend it and move on. And you can have that just sitting there as content, and you can keep repurposing it in tons of different ways. So you can still use it. But when you're strategic that way, it allows you to not burn out, to feel very clear on who you're talking to, what you're talking about, and gets a lot of that like brainstorming stuff down on paper. So that way you can launch strategically and with intention. So I would say that is the most important thing I've learned in launching over 25 podcasts, is that market research is so, so important.
I think market research is important in everything, and you don't have to pay thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars for it. You can pick up a phone and talk to some people in your target audience. You can reach out to them through LinkedIn. There's so many different ways to reach them. And, I talk about it all the time. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and ask people some questions. It's amazing what kind of power you have there. So don't skip that step, no matter what it is that you're doing, because you can have the best thing in the world, but you need to have an audience that's going to buy it.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Alesia. I really appreciate you joining me today. I love talking about podcasting. I love your perspective, and I really appreciate your tips. I feel that they're very actionable, and I'm hoping that everybody listening or watching got their fill of some great tips for their podcast that they've either launched or are getting ready to launch, hopefully. If you want more with Alesia, you can go to listenerstoleads.com, and her podcast is also Listeners to Leads. Do you have a link to your podcast at listenerstoleads.com?
Yep, that takes them
Perfect.
right to the podcast page on my website.
Perfect. So yes, so definitely check that out and connect with her. We'll have all the links in the show notes as always. And if you learned something today, it would really help out if you would rate or subscribe wherever you're listening. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.